I am really enjoying the rain.
As a respite from the hot weather, or?
It's really easy to keep warm, but it's really difficult to keep cool.
Yeah.
And so I've never enjoyed the heat.
You're talking to a man who wears his own fur coat all the time. Hi, I'm Jock.
Hey, I'm Ray.
You're listening to The Pig Wrestlers, a podcast where Ray and I are reviewing this book, Never Wrestle With A Pig by Mark McCormack.
So last time we had your least favourite chapter, The Goal is More Work, Not Less.
Which does make me sound like I'm work shy or something.
You and I were clearly reading different things into the chapter.
Yeah. Well, I like that though. That's good.
Whereas I think the next one is probably even more controversial.
Oh, go on then. So which one are we on?
So we're on page 81.
Yep.
Make friends with fear, ignorance, and sloth. So, he starts off saying, if I look back at the low points in our business, it amazes me how often our failures can be directly attributed to at least one member of the most dangerous triad in business: fear, ignorance, and sloth. And just to pause there for a second, it amazes me that we almost worship things like football players and professional sports people. They wouldn't be performing at the level where we're not shouting at the screen if it wasn't for constant coaching and correcting and dedication. And Cristiano Ronaldo is leading the reigning champions because of his dedication to his craft. Yeah, we don't see coaching in our personal relationships, in our business matters. It's just sort of like, we'll figure it out. No, we won't. It's going to be wrong. Like, by definition, it's going to be wrong. Didn't ask an expert, didn't speak to customers, didn't figure out what other people did, didn't look closely at the competitors. Like, just go down the list of learning, and we probably did none of it. There wasn't even a plan for the learning.
So a friend of mine who is going to be hopefully publishing her next book, I think September, October, is looking at, workplace culture, looking at basically a bunch of things that have happened to her and other people. But one of the topics she talks about is the different kinds of fear. And there's kind of a good type of fear and a bad type of fear. And the good type of fear is the kind that motivates you to raise your game. So it's almost that fear of being caught up, or that fear of not being on top, which I guess, if you're talking about top flight athletes, maybe that's a bit of what drives them on to kind of train harder. And so that right kind of fear is kind of a positive motivator because it causes you to kind of raise your game. But that's very distinct from the bad type of fear, which is the paralyzing type, which we've talked about when we were talking about circle of safety or psychological safety. When there's a culture of fear and people are afraid of speaking up or being themselves, obviously if they're afraid to do that, then that's not a good thing, not a positive thing.
Well, no, he's talking about it as it's a negative, right? Like you want to avoid fear, ignorance, and sloth. So he goes on to say, I realize no matter who you are, you'll always have to deal with people who have more talent, greater resources, better connections than you do. And because of those factors, people often beat you at your own game. It's not pleasant, but it's a fact of life. When you're outgunned, you'll often fail. Given those circumstances, defeat is almost easy to accept. But it's not acceptable to fail because you were afraid, or you didn't know something you should have known, or you were flat out slow and lazy.
Yeah, so I think that's the two different types right there.
Yeah, so fear of the competition and fear of, just general being afraid.
Yeah. Fear of failing.
They say fear is such a powerful motivator, but in my experience, that fight or flight instinct today is not channeled very well.
Yeah.
It doesn't elicit the, oh gosh, I'm about to lose, let me get my stuff together, keeping the vanity in check.
Yeah, good.
And and let's get this done. Let's get this done right. Let's get it. Let's win. And you just don't see very much of it. You don't see like grit. And there's these memes on social media about millennials and millennial attitudes. And being a recluse, I didn't see much of it. I just didn't interact to know. But I'm noticing in workplaces, there's, at least in this country, because I've never worked anywhere else, there's a distinct lack of grit. There's a lack of, we talk about purpose.
Mm.
I just don't see very much of it. And then you hear the stories, and obviously these are all third hand, of how people overcame adversity from whatever their life chances were to what they became. You don't hear them in this country. You hear them about people in the US and India and China and Russia and Africa, like all over Africa, of people who, were given no chance and made something. But you don't hear them here. Where are the shining beacons of the dream of, if you work hard, you can achieve in this country? In this country, we hold aloft, royalty and landlords. I want to own property so I can have passive income. Or
yeah. It's funny because the kind of the hero story, how of overcoming adversity and that kind of thing. You're right. It doesn't really sit well, or it doesn't seem to sit as well with us in the UK. And maybe it's that cultural thing again. The continual kind of self-deprecation, the continual kind of downness on ourselves, because it seems to be very, not un-British. That's not the right way of putting it, but it seems to be odd to hear someone who's like sort of born and brought up in the UK talking about themselves in the same kind of a way that you'd expect to hear in America or other countries where they're much happier about trumpeting their successes.
Britain leads the world in so many fields, high tech. Look at the M4 corridor, all the stuff around Cambridge and Oxford. The Formula One teams are largely all here. We see what they did during COVID, Dyson, but we don't sell it very well. No.
It's either misguided modesty or I don't know.
All the best actors and producers and directors are all British. If you watch like the Oscars or whatever else, it's a who's who of like the British establishment from the performing arts. And there's always somebody new coming up. And they're almost always British. We just don't sell that very well. I'm sure there's other things that we are phenomenally world class at, beyond queuing.
And complaining about the weather.
And complaining about the weather, which, by the way, is always raining.
Because it's such a cultural trope. When I was out on the west coast of America once, I just couldn't put my finger on why I felt just a bit strange for a few days. And I realised because literally the weather has not changed. It's been beautiful blue skies with little tiny fluffy clouds. I was just really disconcerted because there wasn't any change. And of course, when I mentioned this to the US colleagues I was working with at the time, they just roundly kind of roasted me for this. We're such an odd mix of lots of different things. On the one hand, you have this ridiculous pride in stuff we did like 150 years ago, which is fine. Okay. Do we not have something slightly more recently we could be a bit more proud of? There's lots of things going on. We don't have to keep banging on about the 1966 Cup final.
We do get quite patriotic about this, right? It's coming home every time.
Sure. And then once again, as soon as we get knocked out in the quarterfinals, then everyone gives up on football for at least another 6 months, or at least until next season starts. But it's,
all right, here's something, right?
Go on.
We are notorious with penalties.
We're rubbish at penalties, yeah.
Right. Where's the grit to fix it? I don't get it. Where's the YouTube video of we fixed it? You know what? We did it. We trained hard. We figured it out. Now every single player who's ever going to be in the England squad, right down through to the youth system, can take a penalty. They just don't think it through. Jordan Henderson, Liverpool captain, Jordan Henderson, who's going to have to take penalties for Liverpool and for England in the game just before the tournament, tamely missed a penalty. And he's a great player. He's the epitome of hard work and hustle. Where is the grit to figure out how to take a penalty?
So I think it's not technique, right? So you've not only got the pressure of actually having to perform, and do a really good penalty on the day, but it's doing that in the circumstances of the big crowds and all stuff, coupled with that historical thing of being renowned for taking crap penalties. It's almost like we've lost the penalty before we've even started because we're carrying this baggage with us, every single time. Now, you're the sports, you're the follower of sports. I basically am not. But culturally, even I know that there is this weight of expectation that when it comes to penalties, we're probably going to shoot ourselves in the foot.
If we're going to do practice friendlies and stuff, why wouldn't you have why wouldn't you finish the game with a penalty shootout? Like, give your players enough practice in a charged environment, cameras watching and everything to get it right. Give them more experience. Otherwise, the only experience they get is when they lose in a penalty shootout to Argentina or Germany every time.
So here's something, okay, and apologies, this is like completely a sort of grinding segue. But it's, as you say, it's rehearsing. It's almost like they're putting off the rehearsal of the things they fear most because they don't want to realize they're not very good at them. Except that's the point of practicing them. Yeah.
Really?
And it's a bit like that kind of theatre, that release theatre you get in software companies or whatever else, where they're almost afraid of the fact that, getting a software launch or a big product launch right is hard. And so because of that, they do it less rather than more. Whereas actually what you should be doing
in startup.
Yeah, you need to be doing it over and over and over again until it becomes mundane. Yeah?
I was fortunate enough to see Eric Ries live when he released the Lean Startup book. A massive LSE theatre, and that's the London School of Economics rather than the Stock Exchange. And so a guy puts up his hand and says, we've been doing this. Like, we do 2-week sprints, and then goes, okay, fine. How long does it take you to release? Oh, it takes a day. Right. So what if I told you have to release every day? How would you do that? Oh, well, we don't have to. We do 2-week sprints. Like, what if you had to? What if there's a bug and you have to release today? What are you going to do? Oh, well, it's going to take a day to release. I guarantee you, if you release daily, you will figure out what in your release flow you do not need and what is actually important, and you'll get it right more often, and you'll just get better and better at this thing that you are doing daily.
Absolutely. And you'll automate the stuff that needs to be automated.
Right.
I don't know if you know, but when I was at university, I was actually learning to fly with the Royal Air Force. And I didn't join the Air Force because I wasn't very good at it. But I did about 120 odd flying hours with them, and that was more than enough to get qualified to do solar aerobatics, that kind of thing. So there'd be me in a little propeller plane buzzing around. No, that's the thing. So I didn't convert the hours into a civilian pilot's license because you've got to kind of upkeep it every year. You've got to do a certain minimum number of flying hours each year to keep current. Yeah. And well, no, because you think about it, if you only did the minimum is 5 hours a year, right? Would you even get in your car if you'd only driven 5 hours a year?
No, we'll do it. So Sophie, I think our first or second anniversary bought me an aerobatics package.
Nice.
Somebody took me up and this is incredible. I have nothing negative to say about it. It was awesome. So we get down onto the ground and it's Red Hill. So I go into the little shop and say, how do I become a pilot? And they go, actually, it's quite easy. It's $7,000 and a bunch of lessons. Like, I'm doing that. Like, I'm so doing that. And obviously, I've not got around to it. Honestly, like, if you're up for it, this podcast is going to be the Flying Pig Wrestlers podcast.
The Flying Pig Wrestlers. Look, dude, if you want to do it, because flying a plane is fantastic. Why? No. You got to do it.
We are the Flying Pig Wrestlers.
I think, at least for the moment, my flying days are behind me. But
it's just a state of mind, positive thinking.
Oh no, it's not an issue. I know I can do it. That's not the problem. I don't think when I said I was going to join the RAF because I wasn't very good at it, I meant I probably wouldn't be very good at flying a fast jet consistently and with zero sleep, when it counted. That's the level of flying I don't think I could get up to. Buzzing around a little propeller plane, not too problematic. But anyway, the point was, when you're learning to fly, what is the most risky part of any flight?
Takeoff.
And landings. Right? So what you do when you're learning is you do something called circuits. And that means you take off, you fly a 5-minute circuit around the airfield, and you land. And then you take off, and you land, and you take off, and you land. And you do like 15 of 20 of these in like one lesson, right? And you're always practicing. And gradually, you start to get better at locating yourself in 3 dimensions and judging the wind factors and judging your speed and judging what it looks like as you're approaching the runway and all this kind of stuff. You're kind of almost building up the muscle memory, if you like, the experience memory of what it looks when it looks right and what it looks like when it looks wrong. And then also what to do about it if something isn't going to plan. So then you start to throw interesting things into mix, like what happens if your flaps don't work? So flaps help you descend more steeply whilst keeping the plane in control, right? And if you can't put your flaps down, it means you have to take a very shallow but fast approach, yeah? What happens if your throttle is stuck? Yeah, so you can't adjust the throttle, which means you've got to, again, do things in different ways. What happens if your radio doesn't work and you can't tell the tower that you're coming in? How do you tell them in such a way that you need to land without talking to them on the radio? And all these kind of things. So what they're doing is they're starting off with a basic routine and practicing it over and over and over again, and then gradually making it harder by throwing in more complicated things. Yeah? And so after a while, you've done it so many times that the basic stuff of a regular landing is like complete child's play. Not that you can do it with your eyes closed, but it's become so regular and mundane that it doesn't require any extra thought, which means you can then devote all those extra brain cycles to all of the other stuff that they're throwing at you. So one day I was out flying and my instructor just unclipped my headphones. So I couldn't hear him, couldn't hear the radio, couldn't talk to him. And I had to, get back safely. And of course he was still on the radio. And so he could, let them know we're practicing and, rather than thinking there's actually something wrong. But that simulation, that practice, practicing every possible type of emergency that could come up, until it becomes so mundane that you can do, what Sully did and be the first person to execute a successful water landing with any kind of plane, basically, let alone a passenger plane.
And the great thing about that story is he was criticized quite heavily, right? They tried to make out that everything was his fault, even though he was a hero who saved a lot of lives.
Mm-hmm.
And this is our default position, is, you did something different. You didn't follow the rules. And actually, if we're looking for greatness, if we're looking for excellence, then the rules are there to, be pushed and pulled around rather than, be ordinary. So Pep Guardiola, manager of Manchester City, they've just won the Premier League title, widely hailed as one of the best managers ever. He had the England goalkeeper at Man City, who is now a shell of his former self, because he came in and said he can't use his feet. Now, why would a goalkeeper need to use his feet? Well, he said, I want to play a brand of football where every player can actually play football. I want the goalkeeper to be able to confidently play the ball with his feet if it comes back, which draws the opposing team on, makes space for other players, and we can use that. Thank you very much. And you see it very much in British football. There are a bunch of defenders who are just thugs. They can't play the ball. They're there to basically bully the other side off the ball. You see it loads, and you wonder, how are you a Premier League football player? And the fact is, this is just the culture here. We haven't taught good football skills, good grounding, penalties, the emotional intelligence side of the game. We take kids out of school for them to be elite at football. We don't do it like the US, where you must do well in your academia if you're going to become a professional sports person. Thank you very much. If you don't pass, you're not going to get drafted to the NFL or baseball or hockey or whatever else. I think we just haven't thought it through. It's just not being thought through. I just keep coming back to this stat, and I'll dig it out. The government stats on literacy and numeracy from kids leaving primary, entering secondary education, is less than 50% of them are acceptably numerate and literate by the government's own standards. And the government standards are not high in the first place. When are we going to get a reality check here? We're not doing right. Like, there's something about our culture, about our values. And I go to school and there's this British values thing. And I half boil and half laugh, thinking, British values are people in the stands shouting obscene things at the football players. That's the British values I see. Where are our standards published for the world to see? We saw it this week with Cristiano Ronaldo removing the Coca-Cola bottles, right? And saying, agua, drink water, it's healthy for you. And, him being an actual role model took a stand for something that was important to him. No, that's not going to help kids perform. That's not good. It's not going to be in the picture with me. Thank you very much.
You're listening to the Pig Wrestlers podcast. We're meant to be reviewing the book Never Wrestle With A Pig by Mark McCormack, but we don't always get around to it.